Now the positive, oh shoot, there's a big pool coming. Welcome back to the channel. We've got the heat on. We had our first snowfall of the winter of 2023-2024. No tractor snow moving video for this one anyway, but we're working on the Buick. Well, it's out there too. No, y'all remember we pulled the transmission, so we're just gonna like not lay under cars and on the ground and not have to get cold for sure. But it's time to tear into this thing. We've got a couple issues. The torque ball on the back of the transmission, we'll get to that here in a little bit. We got to rebuild that and reseal that. And then we had, this is just from the cooler line, getting it taken off, but between this, I don't know, mid plate and the main case of the transmission underneath here, we had a pretty substantial leak. And it also looked like it was leaking from the input seal, which is behind the torque converter. So we got her on the bench. We washed the heck out of it. It's still not perfect, but at least we can see it and it's clean enough we can start working on it. Step one is removal of all the extra fluid that's held in the torque converter. So that's what we're doing now. And on these jobs, there's these two little plugs on opposite sides of the converter. You take those loose. One lets it breathe, you know, air behind water type plumbing stuff. And then we're just draining it down here. But look at the color. It doesn't smell horrible. It doesn't look horrible, but it is dark. So it's time, you know, to give this old girl a little bit of love. We are not rebuilding. We're just sealing it up. We've driven this car quite a bit, diagnosing some of the other stuff. It drives forward, backwards, shifts nicely, runs down the road wonderfully. We're not going to mess with the mojo, but we do need it to leak a lot less than it does. On these, you don't just pop the torque converter out like you would on a Ford or a GM transmission. We got to take the converter apart, take some of the stator rings and seals and stuff out, and I'll show you that there's technical terms, but and then actually take the converter all the way out, and then we can, I think, without taking the drum assembly, I think we can get to these two plates and get, we got gasket 1 or O-ring. One of these is an O-ring, or maybe two of them are O-rings, but we got one seam here that we need to seal up, one seam here that we need to seal up, and then this one that we know we need to seal up. And then they have gaskets and some seals for, this is called the high pressure accumulator, I think. We're going to seal that up. And then on this side you have kind of the same thing but different. Over here we're going to seal that guy up, and then we'll see how far we go back that way. This transmission is not leaking here, and so odds are we're not going to dig into it, and just for the sake of fixing a leak that doesn't exist, but we will take care of everything that's leaking back here. So that's the plan. We're going to let it drain for a little bit. I might eat a frozen Reese's or something, and then we'll start pulling things apart. All right, it's bright, sunshiny. Well, it's not sunshiny, but it snowed, so it's bright outside. So you're gonna get some of the brightness through the window here, but hopefully you can see a little bit. We're gonna take this retainer ring off. There's 3 of these 1/2-inch bolts were torque converter bolts, and one of them's marked with some white paint here, and that we have to make sure we do not wash off or grind off or sand off or whatever off. But we have 3 out, so we've got about 12 left. I think there's 15 total. Sequence, I believe we're looking for a rubber O-ring, giant rubber O-ring behind here. when you get it started. You don't want to get too crazy with hammering things in here. Again, that is just a cover. Set it over here. We do have a thrust washer here. It doesn't look too bad. It looks actually to be in very nice condition. Now we're switching to a 9/16. Take out, loosen the retainer bolt. Slide that off. Again, we've got another thrust washer right here. We're going to put that right over here on the bench, just the way it comes off. And then we should be able to grab a couple of screwdrivers. Start to work this guy out. What I might do, let's go like that. There we go. That's the front part of, and there's the vanes and inner workings of your torque converter. We are not breaking this down further. It's not leaking. We are here just to seal this transmission up, so we're putting it off to the side just like we took it out on its nose. The stator, that inner turbine part, does just slide off of the input shaft here. However, you're supposed to have a small shim tool to keep these tension springs and rollers from falling out. We did not have that. We managed to retain them all. That spring needs to be turned around, but going back in, we'll either have to find a tool or build a tool, or the other possibility is to pack this with some petroleum grease, Vaseline that is, and carefully put it back together so we don't lose one of those accordion springs or rollers. And then again, another shim. We're going to put that, this was the inside towards the transmission case. We're going to put that just as we took it out. Now we should be able to just go ahead and pull this converter pump housing straight forward and out of here. There we go. And that, friends and subscribers, is the torque converter. And now, look at this, is interesting because I thought we had a front seal leak. And I know I'm not going to leave him sitting on the floor, but in here, if we did have a front seal leak, what you'd be looking for is signs of oil in here. We have none, zero, zip. I mean, none. So the front seal is good, and that means, and we've already checked, the in play on this is really nice. So we're in really good shape bushing wise and bearing wise in here. So again, we just need to make it back a couple more layers and get it sealed up, and this transmission is going to be living a good life again. We've got our bell housing bolts all out. Now these bolts are about 2 1/4, 2.5 inches long. So that's going to go through all 1, 2, 3 of our layers that we're trying to get through here. And interestingly enough, they've got some sealant on them, it looks like, and this one's wet. So this might have been part of our leakage issue, is fluid getting past the thread sealer and making it outside in between those layers. There may not even be a gasket between the bill housing and this first aluminum or steel plate. Oh, and the bottom one here, this is a stud coming from the other side, so it's got a nut and a lock washer on it. And that's our bill housing. We're getting there. Here we go. Let me show you this. This is the bolt that had wet threads, and look at there, right between there. So that very easily could have been part of our leak. No gasket between the bill housing. Oh no, there is. There's an O-ring right here. A lip seal O-ring. There we go. Very nice. According to the constructions that I've read, you can't just go and continue to pull the front layers off of this thing. So we have now taken the two band adjustment covers off. These two little metal caps. There's one on this side and then there's one on this side. They just pop off. You have to be really careful though. They're just stamped tin. So don't pry on them too much or too hard. They'll come loose and they'll come out, but you got to be the patience. And then they look to be about the same exact size, but I went ahead and marked which one of mine came off the high side, just because. Set them aside. Again, O-ring seal on those. We went ahead and took the shifter lever off, the construction side, so it doesn't get damaged. It's pretty beefy though. I mean, a lot beefier than what you see now these days. So it's off though, and then we got to roll this guy over and we got to get into the pan, take the pan off and the filter screen off, and then there must be some physical connection in here that we have to make sure, you know, we release before we start coming back at this front pump cover. So we got to wrestle, and you know, now's a good time. I have a wooden bench here. There's a reason why. If you watch transmission videos or go into a specialty transmission repair shop, and most automotive shops, to be honest too, I don't have a big metal bench, but they'll do transmissions especially on metal benches. And here's why. Because the entire time you mess with these bad rides, they will just flow. Red transmission fluid or whatever color it happens to be, they will just flow transmission fluid every time you tweak them, move them, you know, bump them. And in this case, we're going to turn this bad ride all the way over. So yeah, it's been sitting here leaking on this 2x4 for the last couple days, and yeah, they just do that. Now the positive, oh shoot, there's a big pool coming and I don't know where it's from. Oh, okay, well that stinks. Just that little bit of moving it off the block released. Oh boy, I got a mess. Stand by. Okay, crisis not averted. We did have a bit of a spill. Ran to the hardware store. We had this in plug-in where the transmission fill tube, dipstick tube was in the bottom of the pan down here. and it stuck out, and I didn't want to either break the pan or damage the pan by, you know, rolling the transmission around with this sticking out that far. And so we went to the local hardly store, and well, we got just a plastic pipe plug for 3/4 inch pipe. Seems to thread in there nice. And the reason I went with plastic is I think it's pipe threads in this pan. Somebody comment if you know for sure. It sure seems like it. But even if it's not, we can kind of get this in there and snug it down so it doesn't leak. But if anything, threads are going to get mauled up on this plastic, not the steel threads in the pan. Whereas if we had left this in there and it got tweaked, or we turned on it too hard, you know, these threads could have bunged up those threads in there. So anyway, let's roll this over, pull this pan. I didn't pull the pan in the car because, well, I didn't want to. So we really haven't seen what's in the bottom of the pan. We're going to roll it over this way because the high side accumulator has some leakages on the outside that we don't want to damage. And it's still pretty darn heavy, dudes and dudettes. Ah, well, that didn't, oh shoot, okay. I did it again. Ah, and then I got it on my flitty. There's just oil coming out everywhere. All right, I didn't really want to, but we're gonna go ahead and, you know, try to slide the carb rebuilding tray under here in a way that then we can roll it over and at least kind of sort of capture the fluid that we lose. It's really being a pain in the rear here. Go like that. Oh, this is so heavy still. I mean, it's amazing just how much steel can weigh and how much weight you can put in a package that doesn't appear to be that big of a package. Come on. Okay. There. Golly. Alright. Doesn't have to be perfect. Yeah. Nice redwood cedar tone. Okay. Now that we've made a mess 11,000 times, let's go ahead and turn this. Now it's probably out of oil. I doubt it though. You aren't going to be able to see this side, and I apologize for that. Oh yeah, she's still draining. I don't want to crush the vent. There. I mean, it'll work. It's interesting. The front row of fasteners, there's studs. In the case of the transmission, there's just nuts and then these little square flat washers, and then around the other three sides we have regular like transmission pan, and then still though the square washers are kind of cool. There we go. Come on now. Oh, not too bad, guys and gals. We've got some clutch material, but for a 65-year-old car, not bad at all. just a little bit of stuff in the bottom of the pan. No big chunkies, no pieces and parts of transmission. I think we're in pretty good shape to clean it all up. But the screen here, I'll show you the screen. It's real clean, just a little few particles in there, but otherwise looks really nice. And I think we are in pretty good shape here, pretty good condition overall. So there's a actuator rod down in there. See that little silver thing right there? And you should be able to take this screwdriver and push down on it and get it off of that shifter arm. I'm gonna need two hands. Just like that. Just a ball connection on top of there. Now, I be honest with you, I don't know how you put it back on. And the constructions might say, do not remove the slotted nuts that hold the two halves of the servo assembly together. Well, we've only got one nut that is slotted here, but we do have some other 7/16 inch nuts, and I kind of started to loosen them. And I thought, well, here's the simple way to figure it out. Loosen the ones that you know for sure, the bolts that aren't nuts, that are holding servo to the case, and then pry a little bit and look. If you're loosening the right things, the bolts are separated from the two halves of the servo. But like for instance, this nut that is not slotted, it's moving with the servo assembly. So that one, and this one, which is slotted, we're gonna leave those. Now everybody's loosey-goosey. You should be able to. Oh, we got a line. There's a deal over here we got to turn so it'll come out. Oh, we might not be off the. No, we still got this guy turned in a little bit. Okay, that one's, we're all loose now. Let's go. We gotta pull this guy, turn this guy that way, so there's the other lever that we just popped that rod off of can come up and out of the case without interfering with the inside of the case there. Aha. And oh, out we go. All right, now we're back to the front, and I'm assuming the reversed strut and that mechanism is what might have prevented this from coming out. But anyway, we're back at it. There's a snap ring here on the end of the input shaft. You take that off now. Now you remove all of the bolts for the accumulators, both of them, and the pump cover, which is this guy. There's 9/16 and then halves, but what it says do not do, at least the constructions that I have, is don't remove the nutted studs. And then what it sounds like is we're going to tap on this just a little bit, and the pump cover, this plate, and the aluminum plate will all come off or out or away together. See, we're already leaking more fluid over here, so we're getting to the point of our leak. Okay, so we have to tap lightly here. Oh yeah, we're coming right apart. And we're losing more fluid. That's okay though. That's why we got the tray under here now. We're gonna move it over just a hair. There we go. I got a couple little splatters from me doing that. All right, and the input shaft is allegedly staying with the trans. So we're going to switch places. Now this is supposed to all come out. Oh, the input shaft stays. It says you have to stay, but otherwise it's working. Yes. Very, very awesome. That's where we needed to get to, ladies and gents. We're in a good spot. Yes. Yes, indeed we are. Now, the problem is, I'm out of dang bench space. All right, so you basically flip this transmission end for end, and our leakage point was on, our major leakage point was between here, the steel case, and this aluminum pump cover is what it's called, or part of the pump cover. Anyway, this piece over here, right here. Well, look at this gasket, guys and gals. If you look right here, there's a failure. It's just gone, or it's not as thick as the rest of the gasket. So somewhere along the line, it may have been this way from the get-go and just took a while to start leaking. But right here, I can catch my nail on either side of this little, about a ½ inch gap right here, where the gasket just isn't up to the rest of it. And then that corresponds over here. See this clean mark? See if I can get a good angle. See, kind of dirty, like the gasket's been, you know, sticking here, and then this little ½ inch clean mark right here, and then we're back to gasket material. This is exactly where we had our leak. So we've discovered that. That's awesome. We still have to continue. We need accumulators off, we need this off, and we got to seal all that up. Then we got to put a new gasket in there, and then we can start putting things back together. The other nice thing about what we found here, guys and gals, is we don't, because part of the worry was, well, is this a heat issue where aluminum steel became unhappy over the years because some sort of abuse, or, you know, that caused things to get hot real fast. No, that's not the case. We had a gasket failure, so we don't have to worry so much about the trueness of these parts, these plates going back together and sandwiching properly. We're going to be good to go. We will check everything, make sure we don't have any burrs or holes or divots or cracks or anything like that, but that is a good sign that we're going to be able to go right back together with these parts. All right, let's get you caught up. We just kind of hunkered down, and I wanted to get this torn apart yet this evening and make sure that we didn't have to order any more parts. We do need one thing, and I'll show you that. We got accumulators off of this mid plate. Not difficult. There's nothing. Now there might be a check ball and a pin behind this gasket on the high side. I'm almost positive of that, but we'll be able to replace this gasket, replace this copper gasket, replace this gasket, and up here as well. And life will be good. Same thing, low side, same basic story, but no linkages that protrude in and out of those that have to, you know, you have to deal with. Now I did find out, after all, that we didn't necessarily have to take the valve body off of here in order to pull the front pump assembly. The only thing that released was this reverse strut, and I guess it's no big deal. We'll put it back together the way it is, and things will be fine. But for your future references, You can go ahead and attack the front of this without taking that valve body all the way off. There's nothing that pokes or protrudes this way that's gonna, you know, hamper your ability to pull the mid plate, the pump plate, and the pump off. Now, I kind of freaked out just a little bit because, and I'm giving you it away here with this little guy. We pulled the pump off of, darn it, the pump plate, and wouldn't you know, there we go. Wouldn't you know, there's no gasket here, guys. And I started getting a little weirded out by it. But then I remembered, wait a minute, this goes on and then the bill housing attaches here. And sure enough, we went over to our bill housing sitting over there on the floor. Yeah, that seal rides around the outside of the pump. And this is kind of a square lipped seal. Rides around the outside of the pump, and then you put the bill housing on and it squeezes it tight and causes, between the bill housing, this pump plate, and the pump itself, that seal around the outside. So that's pretty cool. And then the other cool thing, dudes and dudettes, is, and it's not cool, but the input bushing, and I think you can kind of see it. There might be a better spot right there, right where my finger is here. It's got some wear on it, and so I thought, well, we're gonna have to tell the customer we need a bushing slash bearing. It's then we popped open, and I'm not gonna say the name until we get all through the parts process, but we popped open our gasket and seal kit that we ordered, and look at that, a front input bushing and seal. I was not expecting this to be in there, but this must be something that wears pretty common. So we've got what we need. The only part we don't have that we're going to need is, and we knew this when we pulled this out of the car, the rear mount separated. So you have this part that bolts to the transmission. You know, like on most cars and trucks, these two nubbins go down through the cross member and you bolt it up, and then it gives you a little jiggle room. But this just decided to evacuate from this, and happens a ton. Number one, because it's 65 years old. Number two, because it's been getting bathed in oil from all that. That's where we're at right now. Tomorrow we'll start cleaning and we'll start reassembly, and tonight yet we'll get a mount ordered. Next day alert, and it's later in the day. We had to get some stuff done, but we're going back together, so let's catch you up to speed here. The pump plate, this is the pump plate, and the reaction shaft flange is what this layer, aluminum layer, is called. We've got them kind of snugged up together. We did replace the front seal under here, and then behind that there is a bushing that came in the seal kit as well. It was not, I wouldn't say gnarly, but needed to go. So luckily we had that. We didn't have to wait on that. Everything else looks pretty good. We cleaned everything up. Now there's a torque sequence to these pump bolts. We're going to go ahead and torque those, and then it'll be time to double make sure. We got to make sure that this gasket surface and this gasket surface are happy, because remember, right here is where we had our leak. We've got some discoloration here, so we're going to take a little bit of time cleaning that up, and then when we're ready to take this assembly and put it back onto the main portion of the transmission, we'll bring you back. Okay, updates. Everything's bolted onto the transmission case. So you have the pump plate, the reaction shaft housing. It's on. Now we can't do any final torquing of this part of the pump plate until we get the bell housing on and these 7 bolts that hold that in. So we still have a lot of the front to build out. And then we've got, we did get our reverse servo strut in, or band strut in. So it's ready to go. Tomorrow morning we will go ahead and clean up the valve body, put a new gasket in here, and reinstall the valve body. Now, one thing to note if you're doing this on your own Buick is this big gasket between the reactionary plate, I'm going to call it, and the actual transmission body. It'll stick out here between these two surfaces, and your pan goes over and crosses that and lays across that. So we had to take a razor blade scraper and scrape off just about a 1/16 of an inch of, you know, stuff, gasket sticking out. So we're all good there. High-low servos, not too bad. The high side, this side, has a check ball and a pin that holds the check ball, and so you have to use a little bit of I use petroleum jelly for my reassembly lube, and you put a dab of that in that pin to keep the pin from falling out while you go ahead and bolt up the accumulator, the high side. Low side, not too bad. There's a piston and 2 springs, and yeah, not too bad. We cleaned them all up. New cap gaskets. This has a new seal, lip seal here, and then a new seal between the accumulator and the reactionary shaft housing plate thing. Next day, updates. We got valve body on. We cleaned the screen. It is on. Pretty straightforward. Make sure that your new gasket you put in is the same as the old gasket you take out. 2 things: you have your reverse servo or vice versa, and your high-low servo. Those you kind of have to pull down because the servo pin, or the servo, has a little hole in the center for your arm to that actuates the arm. So you have to pull down on the band arm just a little bit so that the servo nubbin goes into the receptacle on the end of the arm. And what we did was, on this side, we took a pick tool with a hook on it and pulled down, and then we vice gripped up against the case here, so it kind of held it. And then with one hand we pulled down on this one a little bit with another pick tool, while with the left hand we dropped our valve body onto the main case, and it went just slicker than slick. So life is pretty good. We did use a little bit of petroleum jelly just to temporarily adhere the gasket to the valve body, so when everything went down, it went down together. We didn't have any slippage. And then there's a sequence of torque and a torque number for all 21 of these bolts, 20 or 21 of these bolts. The 1/4-inch bolts torque to about 15 foot-pounds. The 5/16 bolts torque to about 20. And then there's a sequence, like I said. So that's all done. We're going to throw the pan on, and once again, we are going to put a little goo on our pan just because it's an old stamped pan. It's all cleaned up over here. Life is good, ready to go. But we are going to put a little bit of ultra black on either side because we do have to worry about where the pan intersects these 2 dissimilar or different whatever metals, and we got some gaps, and then, you know, we just want to make sure it doesn't leak. So we're going to do that quick, and then it's time for bell housing and moving along. Well, I owe you guys and gals an apology. So a lot of times the way I do it, and I should video more of my failures, but what I like to do is, if I try kind of a new idea, or, you know, not a new idea, but if I try something, a lot of times I'll be like, before I turn the camera on, let's just see how bad you know, this is going to be. And I just did that, and I got lucky and it turned out really good. So we've got bill housing back on. We've got the body of the torque converter in and seated. And, you know, really not too technical to do that. Bill housing bolts have to be torqued evenly. There's a square O-ring between the bill housing and the pump plate. But this guy, the variable pitch stator, just this part right here, when you pull that out, there are 6 rollers, and then there's little like banjo springs that hold those rollers, because this is one way. It'll turn one way and not the other way. And when you pull those out, we dropped one roller, no big deal, but you got to get your fingers behind it. And then there's a couple thrust washers back there. One of them's fingered, one of them isn't. So anyway, when you take this off, you know, you lose a couple things, no big deal. We put it back together. We had it sitting over here, and we got to the point, this was the one cringe-worthy moment that, you know, was really going to just, I thought, be one of those 2 or 3 hours of, you know, putting things back together, trying to get it on there, having things fall out, putting it back together. Or we did it the old school way. We put a little petroleum jelly around the rollers, and the accordion springs is the technical, you know, the correct term, and kind of made it so the grease, the jelly, this stuff, holds them kind of sort of in place. And then we rolled it up on here, and I had to take a little pick action, and we maneuvered one little thing, and I thought, okay, now, you know, this is probably going to work eventually, but right now we're probably going to fail, and, you know, and then we'll set up a camera. Well, I didn't fail. It slid right on, and it's in there. And I'm not taking it back out to show you again. That was really the last part of this that I was really kind of, you know, not looking forward to. The rest of this stuff, we'll have the main torque converter guts. That'll go in next, and it'll slide right on there. And then we've got the cover. We've got to clean that up, because in these, there was a groove of gunk right here on the body. And what it does is gunk builds up, because this spins, gunk builds up inside of that O-ring. So we got to clean that up really well, make sure this is clean and doesn't have any debris. We're going to slide that in, get our cover on. Well, we got our center bolt to put on. Anyway, it's lunchtime. Wife's home with Runza. I'm going to go do that, and then we'll pick it up from there. Okay, we're finally going to jump into the last couple pieces on the input side of this Dynaflow. We've got the main body of the torque converter. We've got her lubricated between the shims and the bearings and the bushings with some Vaseline, and this should slide on here without too much trouble once we find where it goes. Once we, okay, maybe not. Yeah, we're all right. Just gotta have some patience. There it goes. There it starts. Whoa, this adds a little weight. Now we gotta get the splines to go. So there she goes, nice in on Love and Life. All right, torque converter is assembled minus the front cover. We did get the center bolt torque too. It says, I think the spec is 30 to 35, so we went right in the middle, about 32. To do that, you put the shifter in park, and then on this side over here, same side as the shifter, that's the side that your reverse band is on. You actually take a pry bar or a bigger screwdriver, pry up on that reverse band, and that locks stuff in to where you can hold it, and you're kind of, that's why there's no video, because it's like hold, hold torque, but we got it. And then there's a spec on this thrust washer at the very front of 2 to 9 thousandths. Now, we aren't rebuilding this. We didn't change any internals, so we didn't even check that. We're not going to go down that road for the sake of, you know, fixing these leaks. Now we've got the front cover. We've got a little petroleum jelly underneath this secondary thrust washer. We've got the inside of the cover lubed up, and I want to just make double sure y'all know. See on here, there's weights here. You go around a little bit. There's another weight here. This is balanced. Has to go on the same way it came off. So not only do your 3 torque converter to crank bolts have to be, you know, there, all 3, but they have to be in the same orientation when you go back on here. So you remember our dab of white paint up here. We're gonna find which one of those has our dab of white paint on it right here, and that's gonna go on like that, so we don't have any bad vibrations. Now we got a giant O-ring to put on here, and then there's, you know, you got to be patient and, you know, draw this in nice and even so that the O-ring, you know, what it does is it catches in this groove here. The O-ring will sit here right where the flange and the cover, you know, come together, but then it's actually compressed by this beveled edge inside of the torque converter outer ring. So in order for that to seal correctly, it's got to be brought in, you know, yeah, you know what I'm saying. Okay, the manual that I have says insert an 11/32 drill bit into one of your 3 flange holes, and that lines everything up allegedly once you have all the other bolts started, and it does. It fits in there nice and snug. There's a sequence to tightening these. We're going to go to 5 foot-pounds, which is basically snugging them up, and then we're going to go to 25 to 30. So enjoy some music. Now, I know we've said about 16 billion times that we aren't rebuilding this transmission, but we are going to go ahead and adjust the high-low band and the reverse band. Reverse band, our high-low band's over here. We already did that one. And then now we're going to do the reverse. We took the 3/4 inch lock nut off, and then we're just going to screw this actuator down until we feel quite a bit of resistance. That means the band is fully engaged. And then we're going to back this off maybe about a turn and see if we can get we just want a little bit of play when we're prying on it, and it's hard to tell. Maybe another half turn, quarter turn maybe. Okay, that's too much. You want just a little bit of play. We're going to be happy right there, and then we're going to count 6 turns out. Half, 1, half, 2, half, 3, half, 4, half, 5, half, 6. Then we'll reinstall our locking nut. And you got to watch that middle screw so it doesn't turn. you guys there. And we're gonna get this snug with an opening wrench. And then we're going to put a deep socket on it, and the torque spec is 25 to 30 foot-pounds. So that's like just slight shoulder pain, no wrist pain. Torqued. So that'll help. If it was a little bit out of adjustment and had some wear in the bands, we've adjusted that out now. And quite honestly, it looks like we're in about the same spot as we were, you know, when we took stuff apart. And the really nice thing to note is we're about the same adjustment on each band, so it doesn't look like one's wearing prematurely and the other isn't. Now we've cleaned up the band adjustment caps, and we reinstalled those with new O-rings out of our small parts kit and special tool J183X. It may look like a piece of old exhaust tubing to some, but to me it looks like special tool J183X. Drive that back down in there like that. Life is good. We are done with the input side of this transmission. We're going to flip it around on the bench. Oh, we have to do the shifter. There's a lip seal in here. We'll pop that out, put a new one in, put the shifter back on, tighten it down. Now we're going to flip it around and we'll get to work on that torque ball. So that's the... Why am I wearing sunglasses inside, guys and gals? If you see me doing goofy stuff like that, say so. Comment down below. Take your sunglasses off, dude. You're in the building. It's bright, I know, because we got awesome lighting now, but oh my lord. Anyway, we're done with the input side of this transmission. We're going to move on to the torque ball. I'm going to make that another video. Appreciate y'all liking our stuff, sharing our stuff, commenting, all that good jazz. We'll see you on the next one. Torque ball time next.